everybody, and welcome to Starting an Actual Play, What I Wish I Would Have Known, with our incredible panel of buds here. Before we get started, I just wanted to address the jargon in the room. Actual play is a term that describes a TTRPG show where people play the game as part of the show. So that could be a podcast, a live stream, a recorded video of some sort. And we're going to have people who do all of the above here to tell us a bit about it. So I am going to introduce our incredible panelists here. And as I introduce you, I'm hoping you can answer a question for me, which is what was something that you thought about AP before you started that was woefully mistaken, like way off base, just wrong out the bat. Okay. And I'm going to go clockwise here, starting with Ra Ra. So, Ra Ra is a multi award winning sound designer and GM and the creator of the incredible podcast, The Heart is a Dungeon, which I'm guessing on. Shh, that's a secret. Don't tell anybody. Which you can check out on all your whatever podcatcher of choice it is. And Ra Ra, what was a misbelief you had early on?
I assumed you had to know what you were doing, and I quickly proved that you did not.
Oh, I love that. Okay, continuing in that direction, Connie. Connie Chung is the award-winning game master behind Transplanar RPG, an all-transgender, people of color-led TTRPG show set in an original, non-colonial, anti-Orientalist multiverse streaming Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time, right on here at Twitch at Transplanar RPG, and it's linked in the title. So just click it. You're already most of the way there. And Connie has appeared on Dimension 20 in reference to the New York Times and Polygon. You can't avoid them; they're everywhere and wonderful. You should follow them in all places. Hey, Connie, I know you know everything in the world, but what was something that you were incorrect about early on?
So I started doing APs as of this coming June. It will have been 5 years since I started up Transplanar RPG. And this is really hilarious because 5 years ago, I genuinely did not think it would take as much work as it does. That's actually a reason why we started off streaming APs instead of podcasting. We were originally going to be a podcast. I was going to edit. I literally sat down in the first hour. I went, this sucks. I hate this. And I went, we're going to stream this instead because it is like slightly less work, significantly less work than doing all the audio editing and sound design and whatnot involved in a podcast. So yeah, big misconception. It takes a ton of work. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I'm like, if I want to get it done right, which I always want to do, it's going to be like exponential amounts of labor.
Incredible. And yes, 100%. That is also something I believed. Okay, continuing on my little clock pattern. Ida is a queer immigrant Latina woman of color from the Netherlands who performs, produces, promotes, and does project management for various online TTRPG communities, and is also, where I know you from, Euphoria co-founder. And you can find Euphoria here on Twitch or elsewhere on the internets at euphoriaap.com. And they have a strong emphasis on uplifting POC and ethnic minorities in actual plays, particularly those in Europe. So Ada,
Hi.
what was something that you were mistaken about in your early days?
I thought that the barrier to entry, technical, machine-wise, was much higher. I thought you needed as much RGB as humanly exists and mega chunk computers and all this equipment to even consider doing anything AP related. And I'm like, no, I couldn't. My machine couldn't handle that. No. And the first time I was able to stream something on Twitch with other people and my connection hanging on was with a video card that only had 3 numbers on it. So, and it was just fine. It was in HD. And I see people who kind of just screen capture their Discord, no video, and then screen capture their Roll20 with all their Chrome tabs open. I'm like, that's an AP too. So the barrier to entry technical wise is not as high as you think it is.
I remember the first talk I had, someone was telling me about like lighting for studio stuff, and at that time, my lighting setup was I had a light bulb like on one of those like cords in a jar on my desk because I didn't have a lamp. It was just a light bulb in a jar.
Wow.
And you know what? It worked. You know, all the bells and whistles help, but you don't need them.
No, I had like a rinky dinky ring light balanced on 3 dictionaries and a cookie tin just to get it like to the right height.
Yes. Fantastic. Okay. And last but certainly not least, M. M is a mental health therapist by day and a creative little fae by night. M is the creative director over at Blackwater D&D. Also link there, go click. Playing Shy in their main campaign and is the GM for the award-winning God Killer series. Oh, imagine God Killer. Hey, what a great game. Of
I'm
Olivia
not
Bell.
losing it being here. It's fine. It's absolutely fine.
M is also a sensitivity reader, focusing on how mental health is portrayed in TTRPGs. M, what is something that you were incorrect about in the early days?
The thing I thought about APs and that I struggled over before pressing go live on the first Blackwater D&D session was that you have to start something from scratch. Is that so? We started our Blackwater D&D, our first campaign, in the middle of our first campaign. It was session 73 that we had played, and no, I was like, nobody's gonna follow. Nobody's gonna be able to follow along with this, and that was not the case at all. You can pick up from wherever, and people will become invested in the story and want to follow along.
Um, Absolutely incredible. And actually, last, hi, it's me. I'm No Man or and the Gnome. You found your way here somehow. Maybe you were just lured by someone else. I'm a TTRPG producer and performer and GM. And one of the things that I believed deep down in my heart was that if you just made a good show, and my definition of good show was like you were funny, um, you would the audience would just spontaneously manifest, and also somehow like money would just appear to you.
Mhm.
Like I don't know, I think I had a little bit of magical thinking early days where I was like, if it's good, I listen good podcast, love, they must make money somehow. And I think I didn't really think it through much more than that. Um, we all learn, hey? Um, so I have some questions for our wonderful panelists here. But if you would like to submit a question, there is a form that Sam has just posted in chat where you can post it there. And we will try to get to some of those. If you have something that you just really want to know if you're considering starting a show, and hopefully we can get to those. But starting off, I wanted to ask a bit about everyone's sort of like origin story, like every hero, right? Like, why did you start an AP? And like, what was your background before this? Because we all show up with a little bit of hubris thinking we can do this, but usually we come from something or somewhere, something like sparks us to join this weird little world. And so anyone who has something to contribute, I won't put you on the spot. Or should I?
I can chime in. I can chime
Okay.
in. What prompted Blackwater to go live the first time? The pandemic. To be truly honest with you, we had played D&D in my living room for the better part of almost just over 2 years, the same campaign, the same characters, and on March 14th, when everything here in Vancouver and Canada shut down, we were like, "Oh no, what are we going to do? We want to play D&D together." And on the Sunday night that followed, we played our first session, and I hit record because I was like, I can do my own personal little lore keeping because I can record the video. And we joked in the first session, which is available to listen to on the internet, is an audio version only now, that we could just like, there's a little go live button on Zoom. We could just stream right from the Zoom call. And so we did. 2 days later, we just pressed go live with literally nothing around it. We grabbed a couple socials handles and the Twitch handle and just pressed go live. Honestly, truly, had the pandemic we had like vaguely thrown around starting a podcast previously, but it just never got off the ground. And so without the pandemic, we never would have started streaming.
So yeah, since you were already it was already virtual, it was already digitized
Yeah.
essentially. So it was just like the barrier to entry was low enough that you're like, throw your hat in, see what happens.
And we had nothing else to do and we're all going stir crazy. So we, opened up our opened up the game for people to come watch, and, we're really blown away by the amount of people who were immediately being like, "Do you have a Discord? Where can I find more? What about the 70 odd sessions that can we learn about that before? Because we wanna catch up with the story. Who are these characters? Do you have art?" The questions just kept pouring in. We were like, "Oh, oops. Okay, I gotta do that quickly. Yep." So with I am the pandemic was a very, very hard time, obviously, for the whole world, but in some ways there was definitely a silver lining for us at Blackwater. Is That's what got us on this path.
Incredible. Anybody else?
I got one. I was invited to a couple of APs and I had a lot of fun. I also very recently only started playing TTRPGs, like IRL again pre-pandemic. But the communities and the AP channels that I was invited to with awesome, good people, they were very inaccessible time zone wise. It is midnight, past midnight for me right now, and this is something I rarely do. But I had other friends that was like, yeah, that other show and that other show, they're really cool. And I wish I could watch those and engage with the audience as it was premiering or showing live. I can't do that. It's not as fun watching the VOD. Hey, I have that too. Hey, I have that too. And then it's like, wait, why aren't there more shows that happen to pertain to this sort of community, specifically the European regional one? Huh. Okay, you have one. Oh, if I were you, I would do this different. Why don't you do it like that? And I'm the kind of person that is like, why do you do it like that? Why don't you? And eventually people got tired of hearing Ida's, why don't you? Could you? And I just did it myself.
I love that. So it kind of went from like you saw a gap where you were like, I am looking for this kind of content and I can't find it. So I'm just going to make it. And then there's also a little bit of it because I'm like this too,
Mhm.
where it's like, I refuse to, I'll be like an armchair quarterback for like a little time. And then I'm like, just give me that. Let me do it.
And let me never
Um,
ask any questions and reverse engineer everything and just suffer through it instead of asking. But no, I'll just do it. I'll just do it.
Incredible. Okay, I love that because it's like a very different kind of there's so many paths here. Um, Rava or Connie, do you wanna kinda share that origin story?
Ours didn't really begin until the lockdowns ended. We had our safety bubble that we played with at home, like every week, and got really into some campaigns for a few years when people started coming back out. And we live in a more conservative area, so the lockdowns didn't happen that aggressively here to begin with. But we started running a meetup for queer D&D players so they could all meet at this coffee shop once a month, and we could set them up with safe tables and then send them out into the world. So we did a lot of teaching people how to play because they just didn't know how. So we had these little 3 mission weekends where they'd come over and learn how to play very specifically. And when all that ended, I was like, people stream. I've seen that people stream online, kind of like Critical Role, but that's all I had really seen before. So I went and applied for a bunch of things and got accepted into 11 the first weekend. And I was like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have applied to so many things. But I said yes to all of them. And then a month later, I just couldn't find the stories I wanted to tell. I was having fun, a lot of funny one shots. That's great. But we used to run like a poetry publishing company. I used to try to get into like audio dramas done on stage with like a group of people doing the sound effects and everything. And then we ran mutual aid all through COVID. So juggling large amounts of people with storytelling is kind of an tell as old as time kind of in my life. So it all kind of fell together right then, but that's how it started. But we didn't advertise it. I was only on Blue Sky. I was in the first 100,000 people. I wasn't on Twitter. So like nobody saw what we were posting when we started. But yeah, it was 14 months ago now.
For me, I mentioned this in my introduction. I started Transplaner in June of 2020. Up until that point, I had basically been percolating on the idea of starting an actual play for like almost a year, basically leading up to it. I knew this was something I wanted to do. I wanted to make art, and I wanted to make it in this specific way. I was particularly inspired by Taz Balance. That was my first ever AP that I ever listened to or like encountered in any way, shape, or form. I encountered that in undergrad, and it really kind of like showed me what an actual play could be. And I'd been running games all throughout like like senior year of high school onward, basically. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I went to school specifically for screenwriting and critical race studies. And I'm also like have some experience in spoken word, also like a theater person. So, performance plus writing plus critical world building plus like all of these thoughts about what it means to create non-colonial worlds, to tell stories that fight and bite back against, Orientalism, colonialism, imperialism, white supremacy, all that stuff. Looked around at the time in 2020, there really weren't a lot of like high profile APs doing the thing I wanted to do. And also, I'm just, an artist at heart and a creator. I want to put out stories. I want to, share my artistic vision with the world. So that's kind of how Transplanar RPG was born, right? Rooted very much in like a trans-centric, anti-Orientalist, non-colonial worldview. And that, has been a core fundamental tenet of all of our world building moving onward, even after our first main campaign ended about like 2, almost 3 years ago at this point. But yeah, I know I mentioned like in my introduction that I came into this kind of like thinking that it wasn't going to be as much work as I thought it was going to be. I knew it was going to be work. I just specifically underestimated how much work specifically podcast editing would be, because that was like the one thing I had. I was like, oh, I have an audio editing. I've got Audacity. I sat down and it was like I got smacked to the face by like 10 different hands. But I would say I came into doing Transplanar RPG, other than that, like eyes wide open about like, I knew this was going to be work. I knew I was going to have to manage social media. I knew I was going to have to manage like community stuff. Like I had run, Discord and whatnot. I ran a semi famous like Tumblr D&D meme blog, D&Daddy Issues, that you might have seen like a few D&D memes like 5 years ago from that blog. That's me. Yeah. And I kind of like, I specifically built up the meme blog to be able to advertise my AP. So I put in the work of like making it like blow up a little, and then I started advertising Transplanar on it. And then the work of sustaining Transplanar like overtook doing the meme blog. So it's been collecting dust for the past like 4 years, but I might revisit it. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started, jumped into this. Really resonating with what a lot of other people have said about wanting to fill like a niche that they were seeing not being filled, right? And also like having that creative spark that I wanted to share with the world.
I think it's very cool seeing how many different people come from either a different like artistic medium, like you're saying, like poetry groups, from theater, from writing, from like other things, or just from gaming. And some people have gone from like being enthusiastic audience members to producers. I think there are almost infinite paths that can lead you here to convince you to take the first step. But I think the second step is where things really fall apart. So let's talk about that. So this is okay. Let's just get right into the tea. What was the first major stumbling block that you hit when you started producing actual play? And I'll put it towards anyone, but Connie?
I'm happy to go, maybe do
Yeah.
like a reverse order sort of situation here. I would say it's burnout. It was work. So I came into this, like I said, eyes wide open about how much work it was going to be, but then the work kind of never stops. Especially, there's a lot of work at the outset when you're building the infrastructure, like setting up all the websites, writing all the copy, getting the logos, the art, like a bunch of setup work. But then after that, there's a lot of like maintenance work too, depending on your production pipeline. If you're like a podcast or a Twitch stream or both, God forbid both, which I am, which we are on Translator, God forbid. So like I would say we've gotten Transplanar to a point where I would say it's like 25 to 35 hours a week to just maintain the level of stuff. That's like not even talking about growth or like development, right? Like getting money, advertising, building bridges, doing stuff outside of just like staying in our bubble, right? So I would say that was like the first major stumbling block. It was less so like a sudden wall that came out of nowhere and we smacked into, and more so like we've been swimming and then like the tides got a little bit higher, like the waves got a little bit bigger, and then before we realized, it was kind of like thrashing us all over the place. So something that I kind of that had to happen was I basically shared a lot of the work with my producer / my partner, C. Thomas, who is also our dramaturg and the co-director of the channel. They ended up, like, especially toward the beginning when I was like, I can't do all of this. Like, I really can't. I'm sorry, y'all. Like, they took a lot of the production work on. Like, they came on as a dramaturg. They helped do a lot of administrative work. They continue to do so, right? So it takes a lot of, like, sweat equity, like, to, like, that you have to pour into this to make it work.
I wanted to add to that because I think it's really similar to the first stumbling block I hit. And you talked about like the kind of the waves coming, but also I think one thing is that, and I don't know if this is a universal experience or just the experience speaking from a neurodivergent disabled experience, but sometimes the enthusiasm's high, the energy well seems infinite, and then you set up a process and then you don't really think, wait a second, this process requires me to devote 15 hours a week to this for the rest of my life. And then it's like not even that the work increases, it's that your capacity can decrease over time. Something comes up in your life, or your physical limitations kick in, or your cognitive function takes a little vacation. And then suddenly it's like, there, if you haven't set up, like, you having C is like a kind of like fail safe solution. And I think for a lot of people, it's like a lot of people are going in this alone. And I would say that it's a huge risk, because even if you're, even if you're the most neurotypical able-bodied person on earth, eventually something's going to stop you from being able to devote this much time to a hobby. And so it's like ensuring that there's something else in place, that you're not the one thing holding this whole ship together, I feel like is absolutely essential. That's my hot take. I'm not a panelist, but I just wanted to say.
I
But does
don't think
anyone
you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong, Anne. Like, there is so much that does, especially when you're helming a channel, that does fall on your shoulders. And that was a big thing that wasn't the first hurdle that I came up against, but it certainly was like the 5th through 15th hurdle that I came up against, was very much that I can't do everything myself, no matter how much I want to, no matter how hard I push, and no matter how whatever my capacity is or used to be or whatever. I feel so fortunate now to have infrastructure and people in place, and gosh bless my wonderful assistant Eli. If you're out there in the world, Eli, I love you. Please never leave me. You are the glue that keeps me together. To have people who are able to say, yes, I can handle that, or like the precognition of like, you need this done next week, I'm going to get that started for you, man, that stuff is a game changer. I will say the first hurdle that I came up against, while I'm speaking so I can let everyone else go after me, was that thinking that just because we're all a group of best friends, we don't actually need internal agreements to start off a group. Now, it's different, I think, for whether you start off as an individual and you're like moving around to different channels, or you're kind of cultivating your own brand as one person. But for a group that is a collective, not having internalized agreements off the stop and just kind of, throwing two sheets to the wind, it does become the Wild West about how the structure works, even agreements of who does what work. So that would be definitely something. Had I looked back at that sweet, sweet little Faye who got started and would have patted, Fem on the head and said, do this, it will help you later on in the world. But that was definitely the first hurdle.
Yeah, I think there is very much the notion sometimes like, oh, if we're all friends, we don't have to worry about this kind of formal stuff. That's boring business things. We don't have to talk about what happens if things go wrong.
Yes, because things
for
will go wrong 100 times. And I love every member of Blackwater. I love them to the end of the earth and back, and we still need business agreements to make things work.
That's well, again, one thing is we had, and my first show I did, what we never talked about, because we never thought we'd make money. And then we did make money. We hadn't sought out in advance how we would like divide it up. And it
Oh, what a
causes
talk.
huge tension right away. And it was like, that would have been so easily avoided if we just had the conversation before it happened. We just didn't even think of it at the time. Naive sweet angel baby didn't think. But Ida Arara, do you have a stumbling block that you want to share?
I'll respond quickly to something that M said, and then I'll answer for my own. That I absolutely see you when you have all these things you have to do. And one of the stumbling blocks, maybe not the earliest ones, but middle one, was it was hard to codify everything that we're doing, all the things that Connie also said we're doing, because when you meet that angel that says, yes, I have the spoons in cognition to help you, what do you need? Well, everything. But what exactly? It's in here. Can you put it in a list? I don't know if I can. Yeah. that was a stumbling block I really got to later in my production career experience. But I see all of you for that. One of the earlier stumbling blocks I definitely ran into was I didn't want anyone to dislike me. I didn't want to say no to anyone. And I wanted to be able to prove to them, myself, because Ida is mean to Ida, very hard. Ida is awful to Ida, that I could do everything that was requested of me. But I didn't voice my own capacities or I didn't uphold my own expectations. So, for example, I have AP, I have GM, I have players. Okay, you have all agreed to this, and this time. Can we move these dates? I will move heaven and earth. Okay. Hey, I actually realized in 10 minutes I'm going to be on a flight that I knew about a month ago. Can we change the dates? Okay, I will move heaven and earth. After my 5th moving heaven and earth, I realized I need to communicate that I have lines as well. And I need to say that these are my expectations. This is what I can reasonably accommodate, but I have to say no. And me saying no does not mean that they're going to hate me forever, but maybe hopefully now I know, I believe, makes me come across as more professional and more intentional in what I'm doing, because I now have the confidence to say, okay, I see that you are not in a space to do this now. That is okay. I would love to work with you in the future or consider you for a different project, but I need to move forward because there's a million other things. Sometimes there's contracts, sometimes other people have other less flexible schedules I need to move forward with. Thank you. We'll talk later, but I need to move forward. And that was a really hard learning block. I would tell past Ida, please learn to express your boundaries, learn where those boundaries can be wiggled, and then say no and thank you graciously. And I think that can be met in kind.
I 100% agree. And I think too, one of the problems is like if you do that kind of like people pleasing, which I think a lot of us have tendencies towards, but then also you start to like build up some resentment in your heart, which can spill over to those actual friendships because a lot of times these are our friends. And so, at least for me, I had to do like repair work on those relationships because I was angry that I had been working so hard to accommodate people when I just should have said no. And then we all would have been better friends. And then so it's like this, this like self-sacrificing, but it ends up kind of hurting everybody in the end.
Yeah.
Even if it feels so noble at the time, it feels like you're being the most accommodating, kind person, but oh, it's
And
so hard.
and then when Encanto came out and Luisa sang her song, I broke.
Yeah. Oh my God. Um, Incredible. Rara, do you have a stumbling block?
It happened the first day in ours because I had tricked my spouse creature into recording one session of D&D on Zoom. 1983, we're going to make it some weird little sad parable. And they didn't know we were starting a podcast. I didn't know we were starting a podcast. And right after that, I had to go Google, like, so where do you edit audio? And then I was like, oh, Audacity. And then the next one was, how do you edit audio? And that's our first episode. That is our most listened to episode and has the most ums in any episode that we have. But it was instantly like the zeal got there and I didn't have the thought out plan. So it's like, oh, I'm going to upload this episode to Spotify. Well, when does the next one come out? And suddenly it's like, oh, we have a schedule that I have to stay on top of. And it just started right away. We had no built up episodes. We had no real plan. I knew maybe 4 people in the space, maybe like 6. So we also grew in this weird bubble where we were getting like 10 listens an episode for a while. And it just felt like we were doing a little art project. And then a few other shows messaged us and then shared something. And I ran into the other room. I'm like, Farrell, there's this show called Game Master Monday, and they think we're good. And it was like this big moving moment. And after that, it was like, well, what are we doing? And then we decided to end that first little practice series kind of early and start a new series intentionally, and planning out a bunch of different, what are we trying to do? What do we want to do? We need to put a council in place to watch me because oversight is super important. And we just kind of set ourselves up differently. But that first one was just scrambling to keep an episode every like 2 weeks at an average, because we just started because we were excited. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, there's people waiting. Wow, that's terrible.
Yeah, if you set the pace when, you know, excitement is high, energy is high, and then you gotta maintain that pace. You're like, "Oh
Mhm.
god." And then heaven forbid something goes wrong, in terms of tech or life or scheduling. You're like, "Oh no." It's like all this stress.
Mhm.
Um, okay, hello, beautiful readers. Welcome. So, a lot of those things we talked about, the stumbling blocks, were based around just working with people. And I think solo TTRPG is a thing, but for almost all actual play, it is an inherently collaborative medium. You it's an art form where you have to work with other people essentially. And so there is this like interpersonal aspect. So I thought this would be a great time if anyone just has any advice they'd like to share, imagining that our audience are, percolating on the idea of starting an AP around working any interpersonal advice. So that could be about in terms of making connections in the scene, working with casting crew, or even interacting with audience, because those are people too. Hi, audience. They're real humans there. I just, if we can give them any advice.
I can take this one to start. Uh, I think so much of AP, what helps in terms of longevity, and in terms of getting to the kinds of stories you want to tell, right? Having your vision match what actually comes out, is knowing how to communicate and knowing how to work with people. It's a people business. Every business is a people business. So for me, something that's really helped, our current main campaign is the Chaos Protocol. And kind of like from the very beginning, and this was something we learned by doing through the Second Stranger, which was our first main campaign, you know, we had like 10 million session zeros. Like we had like probably like 11 or 12 meetings with everyone, including like test runs to like try out different character approaches and angles and whatnot, and relationship dynamics within the main party, before we actually went live for like arc 1 episode 1 of Chaos. And part of a lot of those session zeros was like, hey, we're Trisplaner. This is what our channel's all about. This is how we tell stories. These are the values we hold about storytelling and about how we like to interact and talk to each other. If this resonates with you, we'd love to invite you on and have you on as our main cast member, right? And that also kind of goes into our casting process, which we don't do open casting calls or anything like that. We like, for our main campaign, we specifically like invite people onto our cast, people that we've worked with before, or who people that we've worked with before have worked with before, people whose body of work we're familiar with, right? This kind of goes into a bit of a vetting process for like safety reasons, yes, but also for like storytelling, coalescence reasons, right? We want to make sure that everyone has like a similar approach to storytelling, has like similar sensibilities and taste. That's really important for longevity as well. And I'm really proud of the way that myself and C have set up how we like to facilitate and approach conflict. We don't shy away from it. And like it's very much in the transplanter ethos to think of conflict as a very normal part of being in community and being in relation with other people. It's just about like the table culture you create surrounding conflict, right? So is like every little thing like a huge problem, like is like a small miscommunication, like a huge problem that like blows up, right? Because someone isn't voicing what they really feel, or because they don't have any rituals or processes or support structures in place to process their feelings, and to like have decompression rituals and like pipelines for feedback, right? And how we handle dramaturgy and stuff like that. Clearly delineated roles are super helpful. So my cast members know what they're here for. They know that they come on to Transplanter, they're paid, yes, but they're also really passionate about the work they do. They come on to perform, and they know that their job is to think about their character throughout the week, do dramaturgy meetings with my dramaturg, and come every Saturday and give the best that they can on that day, right? Whatever that looks like, whatever that means. And we also have specific processes in place for if they can't make something. If they like, whether they have to cancel last minute or if they know in advance, like they have a vacation or like a work trip or something, we will build the story around their absence if they're going to be absent for a while. And we also have processes in place for if they have to like emergency cancel something last minute. Like all of these things we've thought about, and we have like procedures for how to tackle them. Transplaner, we have a community Discord server as well, several hundred members, something like that. And we have learned through trial by fire the kinds of rules, the kinds of rules we need to have in the server, and the ways that we approach moderation in the server, because it's just me and C moderating for various reasons, budget being one of them, bandwidth being another. And we've kind of, again, like learned trial by fire, like, okay, here are the boundaries that we want to hold for our own private space on our server. Like anyone is free to write and post whatever they want about our show on their own platforms. Like if you want to tweet about our show, positive or negative, right, or neutral or whatever, write a blog post or like make a vlog about us. That's like that. Go for it, right? Freedom of speech, like you can say whatever you want. But when it comes to our spaces that we are in, that our cast members are in, that our mods are in, that our producers are in, that we share with our fans, we're like very specific about the ways that we allow people to like talk to us and talk about us, right? And that has again been trial by fire. We've learned what these boundaries have been as they have been, as we've realized. Oh, I actually didn't love it when someone like cussed me out in like the live vlogging channel, right? Because they were upset with the GMing decision I made, right? And we decided like, okay, actually you cannot like cuss out players or performers, even if like you're really like personally upset about like something that happened in the show or the narrative or something like that. So all of these boundaries, all of these rituals, all of these procedures, all of these methodologies for curating self-reflexivity, ultimately, like it's about what works for us. And I'm very proud and very happy that a lot of the people we've worked with and our main cast members and guests as well have kind of like come up to me and see afterward and been like, hey, like that was, I really enjoyed the process of working with you all. And they've, they're like, I really want to be able to bring this to like other places I go to now, because I've been inspired by the way that you facilitate your spaces, or the ways that you hold boundaries, or the ways that you are able to communicate with each other and hold space and flexibility for mess, right? Because we're all flawed people, right? And like part of my world building ethos when it comes to Transplaner of non-colonial world building is also how I like to world build my real life, how I like to like create community, is I like to create space for us to all be brave, to be able to openly and honestly voice our feelings, right? And talk to each other without it feeling like the sky's falling down. I've said a lot, so I'm just gonna toss the baton over to whoever wants it.
That's great. And just like to summarize, for like coming in from the perspective of someone who's really new, it's like a lot of these things you're just like forged in the fire a little bit. You learn. But I also think taking the time in advance to think about like setting those boundaries, how will you address conflict? Conflict is going to come up. Like it is. So like having those thoughts in advance can save you so much. And then just refining the process as you go, like you said, and having your values and set really strong really early. It sounds great. Okay. And does anyone else have some like interpersonal advice that they just like really, really want to give?
Super quickly, I think one of the things that I have felt the most helpful is that uh, interpersonally, it will often come down to who is ever in the position. The decision process, can obviously be democratic depending on how you set things up, and often does work best when it's democratic. But there will come a time if you are running an AP and if you are the person in charge, whether you're CEO, creative director, a GM, whatever you're doing, is you're going to have to make a lot of decisions, and there will be people who don't like your decisions sometimes, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to make decisions for what you think is best for your channel, what your vision is, what those internal ideals and kind of views, and what you're hoping to do with the place where you tell your stories. And I don't think that it's a bad idea to seek extra help about how to go to do that. I've been very, very fortunate to have some people in my life who've offered me coaching on how to run a business. I'm a sweet little therapist, baby. I don't know how to run a business. I have, I've had to turn to people and be like, somebody with an MBA, come help me, please. And so, or to, I've like to look at my lawyer, Blackwater's lawyer, and be like, I need some consultation, please help. So that it's okay to stand behind a decision that you make, and that you can't make everyone happy. You can try and do everything in your power to support and to do things that are going to benefit the most, if not all, of the people involved. But at the end of the day, you can't make everybody happy, and that's you're gonna have to be able to be okay with that.
That's a great point. Now we do have a lot of audience questions, but I really want to know, like, Rara or Ida, if you have like interpersonal advice that you'd like to offer that you're just like burning to share with people.
I have one relates to who I, Euphoria, or past projects have tried to find people to work with and bring alongside. And this was forged through a lot of experience, and a lot of getting burnt as well. Practices from multiple communities, trialed in other different many communities. And that is essentially creating opportunities for informed consent as often as possible. Like Connie said, making sure that your values are clear, accessible, so someone can go in, inform themselves, and say, I consent to this. Oh, actually, all of this is rubbish. I don't want to be here. Garbage takes out itself. Great. Informed consent could be like, all right, you've all, 20 people have signed up for an AP. I am going to inform those who are shortlisted I'm going to inform the GM of our final shortlist. GM gets to have a moment of informed consent, like, I am okay for these players to be invited. The initial invitees get an opportunity to say, like, oh, I'm invited and these other people are invited too alongside me. Here are their socials. I have a moment as that potential invited player to get a vibe check and then make an informed decision about whether I want to be there. In Euphoria, and again, this practice taken from the communities as well, we have mandatory session zeros. You must be at a session zero, and this will not be moved, except in like the very, very rarest of circumstances. And the reason why they're mandatory is because everyone has to be there at the same time concurrently, because that's another opportunity to say, like, you know what, at that session zero, I didn't feel comfortable sharing my needs or my comforts, or this other person's needs didn't meld with mine, or that vibe just didn't go well, this oil and water. This is time for me to say thanks, but no thanks. And along with giving the opportunities for informed consent as often as possible, having venues for people to safely say, I withdraw my consent. Having neutral people who are not at the table, who are independent facilitators of safety zeros, or someone who is not an active producer, GM, or cast member on this project. Listen, you can go to XYZ person at any time. If you have beef with me, Ida, or the GM, or anyone else, this person doesn't have any skin in this game, and you can talk to them, and they can bring up whatever issue you have or your decision to leave anonymously, and it can be addressed as what can be needed. So I feel that this, in my experience, has done a lot to weed out people who are likely going to say no early on, to them to say, like, hey, not for me, maybe I should just move further on, or to always kind of check in as well. This is going to be the vibe. This is going to be the vibe. This is going to be what's going to be expected. This is where there's wiggle room. And this is where I want to enthusiastically and energetically want to be. It's not a surprise. You should never be surprised as a cast member or as a producer who is going to show up at the table. You need to know this information in advance. It is, what year is it? Doesn't matter what year it is. I'm going to say it every year. You should never know as a surprise who is coming to show up. And there should be informed consent at as many levels as possible. And that helps really smooth interpersonal things later, because when someone has communicated those needs, and I can't think of any other way to say it better, but jumped through some of the hoops or met some expectations of yours, met you halfway, then things tend to go smoother.
Yeah, I love that framing.
And just real quickly, a fun side of community too is being in community. Hard as a Dungeon has really big casts. So we have 26 people one series, 14 another series. So we have a private Discord of around 70 people, and I've played with all of them, but 2 or 3. So there's a lot of relationship growing there. We are kind of offering them to write our next audio dramas, and then they submit them, and then I'll produce them. I'm lifting up a lot of them to GM things in the next year, so I can move a little bit more to the back because I'm more like 40. You know, there's not the career I'm running towards. I'm just having fun. But there's some folks I play with who've got a real fucking chance, and I believe in them a whole bunch. So our Heart is a Dungeon community, I love them. Like, we give grants out to other shows that we just want to hype up. Blades of Mayari we picked for our like unique concept award and bought them some microphones, and that was in our first like 6 months. So we have like monthly teachings, like how to do audio editing, how to do video editing, and then we have monthly hangouts where everyone can just talk. So a fun part about having all these people is you get to be with all these people. So there is a lot of troubleshooting, but there's also such a joy and a strength to know you have people cheering with you because you're both doing it together. They're not just fans.
Amazing. And that segues beautifully into the audience questions. Because I have a bunch of audience questions, and I will say about 50% of them are this very similar, which is, how do I meet people? So we have some people who are like, I want to GM on a show, but I don't want to produce. How do I meet people? I want to have a diverse cast. How do I meet people? I want to find a mentor. I want advice from other people, from other creators. How do I meet creators that I can ask advice? So the question is, we talk a lot about like the AP space and the side eye we give to the community, the TTRPG community. But yeah, in practical terms, like, how do you get started? If you just got here, this person, they stumbled into this panel, they do not know a single person in this weird little world we live in. Where do you start? How do you meet people?
I'll hop on there, because I am such a fan of a really, really polite email. I love a polite email. Gosh, I give me a cold I'll write a cold email any day to someone. I don't mind at all. I think this sounds so, like, base and silly, but it is okay to just ask and just be really polite about it, and also temper your expectations about what that person can provide. If they say no, take the no. And no doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it or you need to be shut down about it. It just means that that person doesn't have the availability or the time to work with you or be the person that you need them to be. I get a ton of emails and questions either over my socials or the Blackwater socials, or because if you've talked to anybody on the Blackwater socials, surprise, it's me. And we get questions all the time. We get people asking, how can I be on your show? Are you looking for guest GMs? Are you looking for guests? Can you come be on this show? Can you mentor me? All of this kind of stuff. I get questions like that all the time. And gosh, the kindness, the emails or the kind messages, it's like, I will take the time because I love that stuff to respond back to someone and say, thank you so much. Like, this is so gracious and kind. This is what I can offer you, or I can't offer this to you, or here's the one day that I am available if you'd like to do a Zoom consult. Or also, I think that there's going in with the expectation that people's time in the AP space when they've built up a following or they've built up or running AP is it's work. And that I know for myself, like, I have feel very fortunate to have some resources behind me that it's like I have been like, hey, I would like to pay for an hour of your time. How can I do that? Can I pay for an hour of your time for consultation? I was able to get a meeting with a sound designer and creator I respect so much, and I was like, please, please let me know your hourly. And I was like, in my budget, I was like, okay, I got a budget in my head of $500. I can do this. That's fine. And I was like, I will pay what. And I learned so much in an hour, for me, who was going into audio editing, knowing a big fat goose egg about what it means to run an audio podcast. Like, that's just go in with clear expectations, very, very kind, and remember that people's time is worth something.
Yeah, and I think too, for people who might not have a budget, there are other things you can offer people. Like, sometimes I'll do like skill swaps with people
Love a skill
where
swap.
I've posted on I'll just post on socials, be like, here are things I'm good at, and here are things that I need help with. If you're someone who has the opposite, call me and let's hang out. And I've done that a few times now, and it's been hugely helpful every time. Specifically when we're talking about that sort of like getting advice. Um, but yeah, anybody else?
I would say on my end, two quick things. One is like general advice, and the second is about getting more people of color to play at your tables. The first is about like just be an active member of the space. I like to use TTRPG ecosystem in like instead
I
of
like that.
community because I think community is there are very many different communities, and I would not consider myself to be in community with a lot of people in the ecosystem. Because to me, a community means that you have shared values at the very least in some way, shape, or form, and I really do not share values with a lot of people out there. Um, but that's fine. I don't have to. I don't have to, right? But we're all part of like a greater ecosystem. So I would say just like if your urge if you want identify what it is you want to do in the space. Do you want to just play at people's tables? Do you want to run your own channel? Do you want to GM, etc., etc.? Basically, it's easier, I would say, to get started if you want to run your own channel and run stuff than it is to just want to show up and play at a place that already has legs underneath it and is running. Just because the second one, someone else has to open the door for you. The first one, you can open the door yourself. That's kind of how we got started with Transplaner. We opened the door ourselves, and then we just started like working with people and inviting them on, right? And like kind of doing lateral networking, I would say, in addition to some like more like up and down. What's it called? Vertical networking. That's like my very vague advice for the first part. For the second part, in terms of getting more people of color to play at your table, I would say if you are a white person, a well-meaning white person who maybe has attempted to put together some shows, but like the main people responding to your casting calls are all white, or if you're looking around at like your local like physical community and like most of the people who are interested in what you want to do are also white, and you're like, gosh, I don't want to make an all white or majority white show. Like, what do I do? Um, it's such a fraught question because it's more than just, well, reach out to people of color and invite them onto your show. If you really have to put in a lot of work to be like actively anti-racist and to make your table one that is like healthy and okay for a person of color to play at. I have only ever played at a majority or all white table like a few times over the past 5 years. That has been by intention and by design. And those times have been kind of like the worst experiences I've had because it's really clear that like one or multiple white people at that table have not interrogated their own. Can we swear on this channel? Okay,
Go
have
for
not
it.
interrogated their own like bullshit, like frankly their own racist bullshit. So you know, it kind of boils down to why are you interested in bringing people of color on? Is it because you believe that it is kind of messed up and racist to have an all white table, with which I would agree? And the second is kind of about like, like are you on the road to doing the work, to being a person that is able to do this? Because sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes you sit with your whiteness and you're like, damn, I've got a lot of stuff I need to unpack. So there are ways I think that white folk in the space can show up for people of color that doesn't elevate themselves. There are so many projects out there by people of color, like especially trans people of color, especially Black and Indigenous trans people, that need eyes on it, that need labor. There are streams being made by people who like always could use a free producer. So if you're a white person and you know how to produce, offer that labor, right? And like that's I think a really genuine way to bridge build, right? And build solidarity, right, as a white person with genuine communities of color out there. Those are my 2 cents. I have a lot more to say about this, and I'm kind of like writing a mega blog post that I don't know if I'll ever post about all of this stuff. We'll see.
No.
Yeah, that's very excellent. I want to see the blog post.
I
Like
I
8,000 words.
100% agree with what Connie said, particularly your second points. And it's hard for me to elaborate how to solve the racism and how to cure the diversity and inclusion in all spaces, not just TTRPG actual plays or podcasts. But speaking as the person who often in the beginning found themselves constantly being the only femme or woman, and especially the only POC person at most productions, tables, spaces, groups, leadership, friend circles, even among kind people. I don't know how to quantify this, and I know we're running out of time, but people of color, people who from ethnic minorities, marginalized people, we can smell your bullshit. We know inherently in our hearts when you're casting just to fill the quota checkbox, and when you are trying to center, uplift, and not make it about yourself, and you're trying to make a difference in the status quo. There is a sniff test. We know, I can't get into it right now. For sure we could probably dedicate a whole stream to it, but you have to really ask yourself why you are doing this. Why does the space need another wonderful, cozy, warm friend group of all cishet white men playing at a table? Why do we need this? We don't. We don't. Don't do it. Please. I take back my please, don't do it.
Incredible. Rara, do you have any thoughts on how to meet people? How to make those connections?
I've met a lot of people this last year. For me, sincerity is the coin of my kingdom. There's a lot of nuance to the edges of that, and where you choose to operate for the sake of connections that you can maybe address later. But if I've heard your show and love it, you'll find out. Like, I will reach out about the nuance of the GMing, of the playing. Oh, I love this aspect of your character, of your concept, and I'll just kind of open myself up in a sincerity. By the way, my name's Rara. How do you feel about telling sad shit? That's kind of how I met Gina. I messaged her about a sad ass robot, and now we're dear friends. And it's the same with like 5 GMs in a trench coat and all these other shows that I consider friends with. We talk every day now. It all started as, hey, I love the art you do, and I would love to believe in it with you. And that opens up a lot of doors for me. I found there's a lot of inner narrator in the back and inner critic there and things you want to keep track of. But when I enter into new spaces, I show a lot of guts right away, and that shows me who can hang and who can't. A lot of people are emotionally turned off by it. It's like, well, you won't be good on my channel, to be honest. So this saves me some time. But that's usually how I go in. I'm a little older and the cringe has died. I'm an elder millennial. We've never known cringe, especially as an autistic person. So I usually just show up in full heart trench coat open. And if anyone cries, I walk up and ask if they want to be friends. And if anyone's mad, I just don't talk to them again.
Amazing. Okay, and then I think I'm gonna offer some of my advice for how to meet people. There are a couple things here. I'm gonna have 2 pieces of advice. 1, you have to be on social media, and 2, you have to make stuff. And I say this, before I started this stuff, I did not have social media. I didn't have an Instagram, I didn't have a Twitter, I did not have a TikTok. I ended up becoming a social media creator, and I still don't have personal of any of those things because I don't really like it. I'm not gonna lie. But realistically, you kinda have to you don't have to be like a social media creator, you have to be a social media personality, but you have to that's, like, realistically where you're gonna meet people, unless you have, like, a local meetup group or something, which, like, maybe if you're in a big city, you do, but most of us, you gotta be on social media. And then the second thing I'm gonna say is you have to make something, and it's very difficult, obviously, to make an actual play by yourself, but you can make content about TTRPG, and it doesn't have to be incredible, it can just be, like, write a blog, a video essay, make a TikTok, make something, because I get a lot of messages from people who are like, "I want to be the next Critical Role." And I'm like, "Great, what have you done so far?" They're like, "Nothing, help me." And I'm like, "I I can't." Like
Charge them hourly. If they want the answers from you, you give them an hourly rate and you make sure it's high.
But my first piece of advice is like, okay, go make something. Because at least for me, like when I'm casting people on shows, when I'm looking for people, I always look to see what they've already done. And it doesn't have to have a ton of eyes on it. It's like you're building your portfolio, right? You're coming in here to an art scene. You have to have a portfolio. And even if it's the equivalent of stuff you've doodled on napkins, you have to have something there. So we kind of know what your deal is. Because if you say, hello, I'm a super cool, good person, and then your art says otherwise, or your social media history says otherwise, then you're not coming on the show. So that's kind of one of my closing things. We are already over time, friends, but I feel like I have a bunch more questions, but they're all like a bunch of tech questions. Maybe we have to do another panel at a later date to address some of these things because it's such a rich topic. I would love it if we could do a quick round of sign-offs. Just who are you? Where can we find you? And what's something that you have coming up in the near future? A little teaser to get people to follow you to a second location. And we're going to go in reverse clockwise now, starting with M. Hey, M, who are you?
Hey, Anne. Hi, everyone. My name is Em. I use fair pronouns. I'm the creative director over at Blackwater D&D, and I love to make sad stories that make people cry. It's great. You can find me at our main campaign Monday nights at twitch.tv/Blackwater D&D as a player in our main campaign there. You can also find us on podcasting apps everywhere, as well as on YouTube under Blackwater D&D, also across all the socials. Come and listen to our God Killer series, Balance, which is out right now. We just dropped an episode today featuring the inordinately talented and incredibly wonderful Brennan Lee Mulligan and Matt Mercer. I hope the episode makes you uncomfortable in the ways that you, because that's the point. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. It's an honor to be here, honor to talk about all our stuff. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. I love actual play. It's great. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, I hope we didn't scare y'all off. Okay, Ida, next.
Hi, my name is Ida. My pronouns are she and her. Quickly think about what in your mind is the kind of people sitting at a European actual play table. Did any of those people look like me or sound like me? I'm looking to change that because that's what Europe looks like. I'm one of the co-founders of EU4. We're a community that focuses on TTRP creators that are not based in the US, mostly in Europe, showing off the diversity of the people and the stories there. We have a couple of new APs coming up. We are going to be at UKGE. I'm going to be at Roll Initiative Con in the Netherlands. We're going to be around. Definitely come check us out if it's a very late, unreasonable clock for you. I want to be your friend and I want to know you very much. Hi.
Amazing. Connie.
It's a me, Connie. Hey, folks. My name's Connie, pronounced they, he, and she. You can find me across the internet at by Connie Chong, ByConniechang. I am the game master for Transplanar RPG, and I'm also the writer and designer behind God Killer, game about killing gods, which the full game is currently in development with Evil Hat Productions. I'm very excited to announce more about it in the coming months. Am I perhaps done with the first draft of it? Who knows? Who knows? But Transplanar RPG, as Anne so eloquently mentioned at the beginning of this stream, is an all-transgender, people of color-led dark fantasy actual play TTRPG channel telling stories set in an original non-colonial anti-Orientalist multiverse. Our current main campaign, The Chaos Protocol, follows 3 doomed agents of the Transplanar Reification and Nourishment Syndicate, or trans, as they answer distress calls across the multiverse, untangle an ominous planes-spanning mystery, and confront their own demons. We are currently in the throes of Arc 3. Every arc we play a different system and go to a different plane of existence, and we have new arcs too. It's really cool. We're in the throes of Arc 3, which is a supernatural urban fantasy political scheming arc featuring werewolves and vampires. So it's kind of like Shanghai meets Romeo and Juliet meets Blade. So if that's interesting to you, you should tune in Saturdays at 8 p.m. US Eastern Time, except for tomorrow, because we're taking tomorrow off because we're fighting that burnout that I mentioned. But other than that, we'll be back raring to go next Saturday, 8 p.m. US Eastern Time. All of our past VODs are on our YouTube. We've got everything backlog with an incredible podcast editor, if that's more your speed, wherever you pod your casts. But check us out at Transplanar RPG on Twitch or YouTube. You can also follow me on TikTok. I'm a TikTok creator at by Connie Chong as well. And I'll throw things over to Rara.
Hey, I'm Rara. I run the Hard as a Dungeon podcast. We're 14 months in, so pretty new, but we have a majority BIPOC cast and majority femme presenting casts as a rule. So you'll find that in every series on the channel, even if the cast is 26. We're currently running the Corner of Pleasure in West River, which is 14 players individual sessions, all seeing a happening from a different perspective in the downtown of the city of Pangea. And we are 3 episodes into that currently. I'll be showing up in a few places. I am now organizing all the fundraising games for the Tabletop Art Fund this year. Gnome Ann, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this yet, but we'll be GMing our first one soon, and I'll actually be playing in that one just to make sure they're all above board over there. So there'll be lots of cool opportunities coming over there. I'll be showing up on 5GM soon, on Game Master Monday soon. I'm in an Orbital Blue series on Who Hurt You that our wonderful producer Sam GMs, and the second episode came out today, and the third one will come out next week. So I show up here and there, but mostly an audio goblin that is having a wonderful time learning from all these incredible shows and AP performers.
Thank you so much, Rara. And hey, I'm Anne. Don't worry about it. I'm everywhere. I want to take this last chance